Boy, it got quiet. I didn't even say anything. I better say something now. I got the in here. Yes, I'm Rod, and I usually won't start till 4:35 because, you know, it's big campus and some people are just walking from physics, and I don't know if I said this Tuesday, but, you know, the people that make the rules at Purdue don't live by the rules, right? Otherwise, the people in Hovey that make the rule, the 10-minute wouldn't, you know, if they had to walk from Lynn to physics or over here, they wouldn't, you know, 10 minutes isn't it, right? For sometimes, especially if the sidewalks are slippery or it's raining to beat the band, or that State Street, which I would have gotten rid of, gets busy. See, and then from time to time, I need to tell you what I really think. And so, if I say, if I was the king of Purdue, here's what I do. For 2 examples, State Street would be filled in with dirt and it'd be a dog park. And you could go and check out a Great Dane. Spend an hour with a Great Dane. Get stress reliever. That's better than any psychologist. Or a cat. Whatever. Or a snake. We'll have a boa constrictor for those who love snakes. So I would do that. I mean, I'm serious. Fill it all in. Why do we have all that stuff going through the middle of campus? I have no idea. But the people in Hovey Hall don't ever cross it anyway. They don't have to walk between buildings every 10 minutes. Here's the other thing I would do. You know all those old people that sit in the lower arena at Mackey? They'd be banned from that lower arena. It's your seats. They're up higher. I'm serious. But see, money talks, right? The John Purdue room. And see, when money talks, I think that stinks. You guys are only here for 4 years or so. Why not have the good seats? Instead of those people that, have millions of dollars and buy John Purdue seats, whatever. Don't get me started because I need to talk about animal physiology. Yes. So remember, the more you talk, the better. The more questions you ask, the better. You should be an active learner. And, I've been doing this many years. I went to college 10 years. I've experienced some things that you'll never will. Has anybody ever had a class where the tests were not scheduled, but they were pop? Nobody here. I had a course like that. You walked into the room, you had no idea if you're an hour exam or lecture. A little stressful, but I'm still standing. Anyway, let's review a little bit what happened Tuesday, because review is a great way to learn. Because review is kind of like a practice. And if you're self-motivated and have a lot of intrinsic motivation, you're like a locomotive that can't be stopped. And that's the best way to be. Persistent. Chinese have a great saying, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. It's good. And the Chinese, I have these proverbs are from, eons ago. But another one is, to teach is to learn twice. If you're really studying something you want to learn, teach it to a study buddy and go back and forth. I even had students make up our exams and give it to their friends. Do you know how powerful that is? You've got to think of a question to ask. Well, how do you think that? You got to look through your notes and the reading and maybe videos, and then you generate questions, and you'll remember that forever. Especially, and then, so there were a couple of people, they would share, they would go home on the weekend, make a test, and switch it. The one person would give their test to their friend, and back and forth. Powerful. Because I've seen too much lost potential. I've seen people crash and burn. Not lack of brain cells, but they got into this spiral, downward spiral, and they could not pull up and pull out of it like a plane. And they left either with no degree or a very poor degree, because if you do just the minimum, you've got an average degree. And I've interviewed people like that, and after about the 4th, 5th person, they all blur. I can't remember anything about anybody because they said all the same thing. If they're in a certain major, they all took all the same courses. Blah, 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 blah. But nobody in this room, maybe some of you know, you can make your own course. You can make a course and learn about equine ovarian function and have it on your transcript. Or uterine function in the dog. You're limited, the title is called variable title, and you got 30 characters to work with to make a title, including the spaces. So I'm not sure if equine ovarian function is 30, but function can be FNX maybe. But it's on your transcript, just like chemistry. Make your own courses. Learn something customized, and then when you're interviewing for a job or something, say, I made my own course and I found a professor that helped me learn about it, and it's on my transcript. There it is. Nobody else that graduated that year has that course. Shows some initiation, initiative on your part. Don't get me started, I gotta go. Okay, so let's do some statements of fact from Tuesday. Now here's why I say statements of fact. Your brain stores information in what's called knowledge domains. And think of a knowledge domain as a sphere. And if you know very little about a topic, it's the size of a marble, right? This size. Let's say you know nothing about dogs, hardly anything. That's your sphere. The next thing to learn is what should go on the surface of the sphere. Because when you learn, you always have to attach something new to something present in your brain, because that makes it stick. If you learn something that's way above the surface, you might learn one fact, but it's called rote learning. It's up here, it's not even available to solve problems. But down here, if everything is in a sphere, there's what's called a spread of activation. One thought leads to another, leads to another, leads to another when you're solving problems. But if your solution's up here, you'll forget it because it was rote learn. I'm going to study cram the night before the test. And let me tell you, if you cram the night before the test, you're into rote learning, you're into short-term learning, and a lot of that stuff will never be present when you're solving problems out in the real world. You take it a step at a time. And there was a very famous educational psychologist that said this. He was asked, it happened to be a man, he was asked if he had to boil learning all down to one statement. Educational psychology is basically learning. He said this: ascertain what the student knows and teach them accordingly. That means find out what their sphere size is, what they know, and then what's the next appropriate thing to learn. And that's what a good tutor does. Find out what you know, and then, see, I can't be your tutor. I can be your tutor for this hour, but I can't individually know what you know. I have to kind of like shoot out, but I can get some points from you when you ask questions. Because I know if you ask a question, then you're working on that next zone. And there's all kinds of psychology about it, but that's the best thing to learn, the next thing. And it's called the zone of proximal development. This has all been mapped out. Ascertain what the student knows and teach them accordingly. So if they took biology 110 and 111 but didn't walk away with much, it's going to be hard to learn on beyond that. You know? Some of the freshmen that are in biology 110, they're going to get a D, D minus, and then they're going to take 111 in the spring, but it's not going to be attached to much, and they'll go through biology, and in the spring you ask them, what did you learn? Give me a couple statements of fact. I can't remember anything. I don't know. So anyway, statements of fact are short propositions that can be judged to be true or false. I'll give you one example. Dogs have 4 legs. Now that can be judged to be true or false. In most cases it's true, and if you're really good you can say, well, it's not always true, right? How many have seen a 3-legged dog walking around? There you go, yeah. It's not what they were born with, but they can get along. There's some that can get along with 2 legs missing. It's pretty hard. Big dogs, like my neighbor's Irish Wolfhound, it's hard to take a leg off and have them survive. It's, you know, almost better to euthanize them. You know, I hate to say that because my neighbor had to do that one time. The tumor was on their front leg, and I wouldn't see her about once a week, but every week I could tell it was getting bigger. I mean, it was terrible. So statements of fact are things that you can say to be judged to be true or false, and it's a way to learn. So in your notes, when you make statements of fact, you make a little bullet sign, and then you say something. And then you skip a line and say another thing. Then when you study for a test or go review for a test, you read them out loud, those statements. And there's some place in here, maybe Tuesday I can show you, I made a video about this. But what you do is you have all these statements of fact, and you read through them, and you say them out loud because you hear it again. So let's do some statements of fact from Tuesday. Look in your notes, and this will help some people, like, oh, I didn't hear that, right? You didn't write this down. You're not perfect. And I love volunteers because this is how it should be. It should be like a two-way thing. I don't ever want to stand here for 50 minutes and yap, and I'm never going to hand out PowerPoint pre-printed slides because that takes away from your learning, and I know that. PowerPoint, if it was up to me, I'd kick it like a football out of the place. There's a few nice uses of it, but it's not the best. Okay, here we go.
Heparin is a anticoagulant, but if you overdose, it can cause blood disorders.
Okay. Now, say that again louder, and I'm going to say that's too long, but we'll break it down. So go ahead, say it again.
Heparin is an anticoagulant.
Now let's see how you got better. Heparin is an anticoagulant, period. But what was the second thing you said?
If you overdose on it, it can cause blood disorders.
Yeah. Excess heparin injected into any animal could cause bleeding disorders, or death, or all of the above, right? And that gets to be physiology. Physiology is things are in a normal range. And there can be too low or too high. And this is, we're talking about, it's used as a medicine. The interesting thing about heparin, it can be used in a test tube, or it can be infused into an animal. Did I talk about the cannulas? I can put a cannula in the tail vein of a cow or jugular vein of a pig. Did I say that? Okay. So cannulas are, I'm an experimental person. I've done a lot of experimental surgery, experimental animal stuff. I was lucky that all my mentors always were doing surgery. I was places that were, I was one place where the scientists were actually doing surgery on the fetal pigs. The uterus would be drawn out of the body of the sow, the uterus would be cut open, and they were doing something to the fetus and then putting everything back. And I got to see all that. So anyway, yes, so heparin is an anticoagulant. See how short you can make that? And when you're reviewing that in your notes, look how quick you can read through that. And then there are there are problems with excesses. Okay, excess. It's possible to be poisoned by heparin. I told you about the neonatal kids, right? The babies. Yeah. The accident. And I showed you what? Did I look up the number of medical accidents? That was I hope it's not 250,000, but it could be if you count them all. That's why it's very important to ask questions when somebody comes at you with a needle or doing anything. And then here's another thing, a little secret. Always ask, how many times have they done that? I don't want somebody practicing on me or my animals. So I've castrated hundreds of boars. So it's like child's play. But if somebody's doing it for the first time, they're going to struggle and may not do it right. A 500-pound boar will bleed to death if you don't do something. You can't castrate them like a one-day-old pig. Okay, so always ask somebody, how many of those have you done? Like if you've got a dog that's got some injury and the vet wants to do something to the dog, how many times have you done that procedure? I want somebody that says, I do 5 a week. I don't want somebody to say, I did 1 last year. Right? So, heparin, anticoagulants. Okay, here we go. Because this is how we learn.
7% of the body weight in animals is blood?
Yes. 7% of the body weight is blood weight. But now so that you could make that statement. But here's a little proviso. That's a convention I use on tests and other things because it's easy to figure 7. Some animals, it really should be 6.5. Maybe another animal, 5.5, another species, right? But 7 is my general, and it's close enough. But those that go on to vet school, and I've had many, they show me what they get per species, right? Because it can vary a little bit. But I just say 7, because, okay, 7 pounds out of 100 is blood weight. So I know 200-pound dog is 14. I can do multiples of 100, and I can even do 50, because half of 100 is 50, so that'd be half of 7 is 3.5. So I can do that real quick. But it's a convention I use. You can have another instructor that says, I'm always going to use 6%. And then you can understand, okay, fine. It's a convention. Rod has a convention. I agree, doesn't cover every animals. Even, you can't even use the same figure for horses. Draft horses are different than hot-blooded horses, if you're used to that term. I love those draft horses. I just can't get enough of them. They're so gentle and understanding. But anyway, their percent is different than a thoroughbred horse, hot-blooded. Okay, be aware I'm trying to tell you, be aware of when I say something, it's probably a good common average figure, but it's not going to apply to every situation, right? Be aware of that. Here we go.
Ureters carry urine from kidney to bladder.
Okay, ureters transport urine from the kidney to the bladder. Good.
The urine uses peristalsis.
Movement of urine in the ureter is accomplished by peristalsis. And you can make that even shorter. And see, there's an act of when you're thinking about how to make a statement, that's learning. You're playing with it in your brain. How do I say that? Peristalsis in the ureter. And you should know peristalsis occurs all over. And peristalsis, here's a new fact. When there's peristalsis, it's always done by smooth muscle. The more you say it, the more you practice with somebody, you could show study buddies your statements. Okay, that side of the room is kind of quiet. Come on. Somebody raise a hand. Help me out. Yes.
The nephron is the functional unit of the kidney.
Perfect. I can't do it any better than that. The nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the term functional unit, that means there's a lot of those doing the key work. Let's put it that way. So nephrons make urine. They do other things. But one big claim to fame is making urine, and that's done by many, 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 many nephrons.
Loss of blood can cause a vasoconstriction.
When blood is lost, vasoconstriction may occur. See how good this is? How it's got to the point about IV fluids and accident victims? And your body makes compensations, and sometimes it's contraindicated. That's a term, C-O-N-T-R-A, contraindicated. IV fluids is contraindicated if you lose less than 10% of your blood volume, because you've already compensated. Always test, always ask. See, here's the deal. Dogma. D-O-G-M-A. I saw a little cartoon of what's the definition of dogma? The mother dog. No, dogma is a statement generally accepted, but it's never been proven one way or the other. Be careful about dogma. I'll give you a good example, physiology example. For many years, gastric ulcers, and whenever you say gastric, G-A-S-T-R-I-C, that means stomach, nothing else, not the intestines. Gastric ulcers were caused by too much acid production. That was the dogma. And so all the physicians prescribed drugs that decreased acid production. Turns out it was all bad. Most ulcers are caused by bacteria. And some physician, I think he was from Australia practicing in England. I mean, you guys could look up the story. But he had a bunch of patients with ulcers, and he was like a brainstorm. And brainstorm means never throw anything out when you're brainstorming a problem. Never, never, never. When initially, obviously. And so he was brainstorming, goes like, why are all these people having ulcers? You know what, I'm going to culture their stomachs. So you just pass a probe down and collect some stomach content. Maybe he did what's called a biopsy, B-I-O-P-S-Y. Biopsy is like a little nip of a tissue. You can do that. Biopsy, B-I-O-P-S-Y. He cultured whatever he got. I can't remember what he collected. All the ulcer patients had the same bacteria population. He goes, gee, what if I treat them with an antibiotic that targets that bacteria? He did. All the ulcers disappeared. So now the main cause for gastric ulcers, there's a certain name for that bacteria. I can't think of it, and that way you don't have to write it down, but you can look it up. There's a certain bacteria that's the one that's causing most of the problems. Remember how I just said, I never say anything that's 100%, right? So are some ulcers caused by excess acid production? Yes. But the vast majority are this bacteria that this guy discovered. He happened to be a male physician, but there's plenty of good female physicians. Because I was on sabbatical at the IU Med School and sat into some of the med classes. It was very learning. Yeah, but there were a lot of females in med school at that time. And they were just as good as the guys, let's put it that way. Okay, other statements about Tuesday. Did we cover, I don't want to say cover, did we discuss what we had? Okay, well, I've got a couple things to do today. I want to go through some of the reading, the clicks. But before I do that, and before I forget, I want to show you what you can put in your lab reports. Because we haven't talked a lot about them. But I know on Tuesday, I think I said, you're going to do histology. Another name for that is microscopic anatomy. Then you're going to do macroscopic anatomy. That's like what you can see with the naked eye. Gross anatomy, another term for that. Then you can do physiology, like physiology of the kidney. And then you can do pathophysiology, like what can go wrong with the kidney. And then there's a section called kind of like wide open. Maybe you have some experience that doesn't quite fit in those four categories and you want to talk about it. It's still related to, let's say, kidneys, if that's the lab report. But you want to talk about something about a relative or kidney transplant, something. So anyway, on the anatomy part, I think I alluded to this on Tuesday. I have at home a ton of anatomy books. And I've got a picture hanging on the wall there I'm going to show you in a minute. But for example, Guide to the Dissection of the Dog. Okay? So obviously there's anatomy in here. But it's kind of tough to have images that are in here in your lab report. You would agree, right? Let me find a page I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm going to put this right here. So this, there's all kinds of diagrams, right? But to take a picture of that, sometimes you can get the page flat, but sometimes the page isn't flat. So it's like, I got all these physiology and anatomy books. I'm concentrating on anatomy now. How can I make them available to you? Because most of the images are not on the internet, because most of the people are selling the books. It'd be bad for me to put all those images on the internet. Maybe I can make a YouTube video and use some, but I'm not using it all, and I'm not selling it. I'm not selling a video. All my YouTube videos are free. And I've had some past students make them, and I can't remember if I said that in this class. Tara made one on ligament injuries in horses, and she's got 34,000 hits. That's an undergraduate. Sure, it's been a number of years, but her video has 34,000 hits because somebody likes it, and somebody else tells them about it. So Tara, I look at, I can get how many are being looked at even at this moment, and I always, like, when she was here, I always kidded her, like, you're making me look bad. Your video is above mine, or mine, and it's like, it's often near the top. So I think a lot of vet schools, and there's a lot of vet schools around the world that don't have a lot of resources, right? So they're, looking at these things, high schools. But she's got 34,000 hits, so it is over 4 years, but that's amazing. She's got 200 likes. People are saying, this is the best one I've ever seen. So it's kind of invigorating for me Because one of the last ones, and I'm gonna have you guys look at these videos, but one of the last ones I made was directional terms in anatomy, you know, showing you proximal, distal, medial, lateral, and the right way to do it. But how do I get you to have access to all these books? So there's a book. Here's a razor blade. Sharp. You don't cut out, and I'm having the TAs do this, so you're not going to be cutting, but the TAs will. But what we're going to do is, here, sorry, I keep reading. Sorry, cut anybody, keep track of that. You have this page, and this room is available 3:30 to 5:30 on Wednesdays. I know some of you are in lab, but maybe we'll try to find another time. I'll put this down for a minute. Okay. So remember, this room is ours, 3:30 to 5:30 on Wednesdays. I know some labs are running, but I'm having some TAs here. Now, can you take a picture of their phone? Pretty good on that one. Now, what I do is I take a picture, and then I will, I have some big desktops at home, like that, 2 terabyte hard drives and 2 terabyte solid drive. But let's say I want to take a picture of this. Then I can send it to myself and then open it in some program. And I know the TAs are going to work on, according to what ITAP has for you, they're going to develop some kind of flow chart. You know, take your picture, do this doesn't work, this works. I don't even want to do that. The TAs can do it because they know what's on ITAP. I'm totally independent at home. I've got my own software. I use things that aren't here. But that way you get a nice picture and you put it in your lab report. The one nice thing about this book, this is a different book, they have this is like a dissected head of a dog showing the vascular system. I mean, you don't see, these are not on the internet because the book company, I probably paid more than $200 for this book. But you can put in your lab report. I'm thinking, how do I let the students access this? So here's, this book did a great job. The photography is phenomenal, but they didn't put any labels on the original photograph. And I'll put this up there, when we leave, you can look at it. They had an artist draw what the photo was made and then labeled the drawing. And it's so perfect, you can say, what's that little bump there on the drawing? And you go back and they've got it labeled. Everything. More than we need, but what a beautiful thing. Taking a super dissection, by the way, I mean, that's a lot of work. Dissecting a dog head to get the veins like that. But then you can take a picture and have it in your lab report that you'll submit for grading, but then you'll have it for you to use forever. And say, well, maybe, what does that side look like? You know, it's got everything labeled. So I've got tons, I'll get this out of the way for people. The TAs are going to be slashing and burning. And when you come, and this will take us a while, but we'll probably start this next week, the book will still have the cover in the back, but everything inside will be removable. And we'll probably clip them together by chapters or something. So you can still, you can say, oh, that pile has dogs. And there'll be cats, horses. That book for that is dogs and cats. That one is like the phenomenal anatomy book. There's too many books have the picture, but they have labels, and then you know, like the labels obscure stuff. And we're gonna, this is not destroying books, but how many people have you ever known that cut up books like I do? Anybody? I don't know why you don't think. If I was a freshman, buy one biology 110 book and cut it up and share the chapters. Because you know, I always ask freshmen, how often do you use that biology book? Not very much. And you pay $200 for it, and you're not using it much, then you should cut it up, hand out chapters to your friends. Don't photocopy them, because that's infringement of copyright laws. But there's nothing in the world that says you cannot cut up a book and share it, right? So I'm sharing this for your lab reports that you put up into Brightspace, that's all private. So, you know, we're not selling books. We're not like, we could sell these photos and have pizza parties every day. That'd be kind of neat, but then we could get in trouble. Not that I avoid trouble, but you know, I don't want you guys to get in trouble, okay? So anyway, we'll be doing that. I get tons of books, and I'm thinking, how can I share them with everybody? If I give them to somebody, there's only, you know, one person gets it. If I give them to the graduate students, only one person gets the book. This way, everybody can take a picture of that dog. There'll be other things. You can take pictures of horse ovaries. In our lab, I'll bring a horse ovary. We're not dissecting horses. There's no room in that room. In fact, I purposely didn't order any dogs to dissect because the room we're using is not really dedicated dissection room. They never built one. You might see that room down there called anatomy lab. That's kind of laughable. It's not really an anatomy lab. So anyway, we have pregnant cats, right, Katie? We saw some yesterday. Opened them up. I'm hoping that there are different stages of gestation rather than all very small. I don't know. And the TAs and I were talking yesterday. I'm not sure if I want to ask the company where the cats are coming from. I know it's all on the level. This is not like running through St. Louis at night getting cats. Do you know they used to do that with dogs? They used to steal dogs and sell them to med schools and vet schools. They used to do that. Yeah. Because there are these people that then, the people that steal the dogs are called bunchers. And then they would sell the dog to a legitimate person that was selling to med schools and vet schools. But the people, and they had them on tape. There was an undercover reporter, and they had a little tape recorder and a video in the back, and the guy goes, yeah, we go through St. Louis neighbors and, you know, neighborhoods, and boy, some of them, you know, they got some very expensive dogs, right? You've heard of people stealing dogs, and yeah, it's crazy. So anyway, I wanted to tell you about that before I went into the website, which if you know me, it's on rawhours.com, and you know, people can still drop or add. In this class, I don't think there's a lot of that going on right now, but let me just review it one more time. There's my website. There's Bella. She's gone now, but she's having fun in the snow. Newfies love snow and water. You go to courses. Then you go to this top one. Again, I tell you why I don't have the numbers there, because you don't need a password to get into my website, because you know the world can go there free. So anyway, there's a syllabus. I guess just quickly to review this. I'm not going to, you know, there's websites you can do that. Topics. So assessments of learning, 4 online exams, and we did a little bit of that on Tuesday, like fill in the paragraph. You're going to get a whole empty page, and at the beginning it says create a paragraph on renal physiology that incorporates these 10 terms, or maybe 12, whatever. Then you think about it. It's the best thing to tap into somebody's brain. I mean, it is beautiful. And it's a paragraph. A paragraph tells stories, so it's not statements of fact. You don't make 10 statements of fact. No, you write a paragraph that flows, right? And it's good practice, because when you get out in the real world, a lot of you will be supervising things, making training documents, and if you've practiced a little bit the flow, the better. And you can have somebody read it, but remember, write the paragraph yourself, because Turnitin is a supercomputer, and if it's seen that paragraph someplace else, or those 2 sentences, it's going to highlight them, and your similarity score is going to go too high, right? I think it says something. Read that. Anyway, assessments of learning, that, and then the lab reports are different than any other lab you've had, because in all the labs you've had, everybody's synchronized. Let's say we do a renal lab. Well, that's a lot of waste, because if we took the kidneys out of a pig, what do we do with the rest of the pig? Well, you're working with the kidney. So in the lab, we're going to have like 2 people that dissect something, and they're going to divvy out parts. Here's the lungs, here's the kidneys, and you're going to concentrate on that for that day, but you're not gonna make a lab report because then you're gonna kidney another week from another animal, another species. So over time, then you'll be making lab reports. And maybe the first one will be common. We'll do anatomical terms and anatomical planes, and I'll explain that in lab and have you watch those 2 videos. And I'll maybe bring some model animals in to show you with piece. You know, whenever you talk about anatomical planes, you use a sheet of paper. A plane is a 2-dimensional. And it's very important to know what tissue looks like inside depending on the anatomical plane that it was cut, right? Oh, and that's right, Katie, I found the DVD on the body worlds, and I think I uploaded it to the 498. I'm going to have these guys look at it too. Anybody familiar with body worlds? Not the TAs, because body worlds? Okay, let me show you that. I still got plenty of time. A number of years ago, a med school in Germany developed a process that embedded plastic into tissue. Ring the bell? Let me tell the story, okay? And it's fascinating. And the Gunther, the anatomist, is the best dissector in the world. And his team. And you know, plastic, no smell, right? You can't smell this plastic. So they have these people models, actual people that donated their bodies to the med school. They dissected them, embedded plastic into the tissue, and then this exhibit, I should say, traveled the world. And the one thing I was talking about the other day, maybe it was yesterday to the TAs, I haven't kept track of, I know they were doing some animals, I'll show you a horse they did. But I think they started to do animals for vet schools and maybe only their schools. I'm sure it's quite expensive to buy one, the process. But these people in Germany donated their bodies to science. Gunther processed them, and I'll show you a few, like a tennis player hitting with a racket a ball, and that's how, and you see the muscles. Sometimes, there's one display where the person's skin, he's got it in his hand, his integument, the whole, you know, I know it sounds weird, hopefully don't eat lunch, but we need to talk about this, right? I mean, this is the class. Phenomenal. If somebody had died of cancer, they left the cancer there when it was dissected. Oh, if somebody had a hip replacement, you see the metal. Oh, it's fascinating. So this was in Chicago a number of years ago. Of course, I had to go to it. I don't want to say cheated. How can I say this? I went through the exhibit twice, and you were supposed to just go and leave, but I couldn't. But it was phenomenal. And I was this close to a horse. And you know how, if you've ever dissected the things that are preserved, it's either formalin or we're going to do stuff that's got not formalin, but there's always an odor. The whole horse, in fact, it's got a person riding the horse. I'll show it to you in a minute. This is what you smell, nothing. Millions and millions of people visited it, and it only went to big towns that has a population. Chicago, there were med students there when I was there. There's old, you know, that's quite a population pool. I think when it left there, it was going to Tokyo, Paris, whatever. But when it's scheduled to leave, it has to leave because then the next place is expecting it. Well, what happened in Chicago, it was so popular that they, for like the last 2 or 3 weeks, I can't remember exactly, they said, we have to do something. We're not going to let, there's not all the people that want to see it, because they were selling tickets, timed, I think you had a 2-hour slot. Remember how I cheated? I went back, and don't tell anybody I cheated though, but I was so excited. Anyway, this is a Museum of Science and Industry. How many have been there? Yeah. It's always got a time, like 8 to 5, whenever it's open. They said, we have to go 24/7. There's so many people want to see this exhibit. So for the last 2 or 3 weeks, the museum never closed that exhibit. I'm sure that everything else was closed. Then it goes on. So let me show it to you. It's something else, and I'm going to show, I have a video that's an hour long, and I'm going to make it available to you because I can't put it on my website. Why? Because anybody in the world can watch it, and then that's infringing on their selling the video, the DVD. But if I put it up there for educational, only people that have passwords can get into it. So that's, I can do that for educational reasons, right? So let's do it. Body Worlds, and I found the book too, Katie. I should bring that. Body Worlds, and then I'm going to say horse. See, that's what I did yesterday, or maybe it was in here. So here it is. First started out, and the exhibit I saw was 95% people. They had the horse, and the video shows how they did the horse. But now, and I'm doing this from a little bit of memory, I think they've been trying to get more animals. And then, of course, what happens when you have a product that's very popular and expensive, like a purse or shoe, especially women's clothing? I don't know why this happened. I'm going to say purses. What happens if you have like a real successful product?
Low supply,
Well,
knockoffs.
knockoffs. So somebody, some country, I'm not going to name the country, saw how popular this exhibit was. So they found out how it was done and started their own exhibit of people. But there's a little rumor. Remember how Gunther, they donated their bodies to science? The knockoffs, they're not sure if those people donated their bodies to science. See the difference? Anyway, horse. There it is. Now that's not the best view of it. If you watch the video, this horse and the human on top smells just like this plastic. And let me find a better picture because I want to show you what's in the person's hand. And so, by the way, it's called plastination, if you ever want to do that. Plastination. Such a, I mean, it's not for everybody. You can't, we couldn't do it. I'm not sure if the vet school does it at all. It's quite a process. But you end up with a model that's plastic, basically. So let me see if I can get this one out. There it is. Sorry. Okay. I'm trying to open, okay, there it is. Why was that there? Anyway, so here's the person, but you see how the person is expanded? The ribs have been cut, and the two sides of the body, the front and back, which is posterior and anterior I should say, and then posterior, it's spread out, and you can see tissues here, and those are all preserved. So you can see blood vessels, and you can see all the stuff. Then this person, it's a real person. They donated their body for this, to science. You see, I'm not sure if you can see it, but there's a brain. He's holding his own brain. That's his right hand. The horse's brain is in the left hand that you can't see on the other side. And you can walk up to this exhibit and go 360 around it. You know how long that would take? To really, if you really enjoy anatomy, and then you have to enjoy that somebody can dissect. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of hours. It's not like we have a 2-hour lab, and by the time cleanup, I mean, that's why we're not even doing whole animals. We're going to do parts and get everybody accustomed to measuring, weighing. I'm going to teach you skills that you can use for the rest of your life if you want to, right? But his brain was in the right hand, and the horse's brain is in the other. And who had the bigger brain? He did. His brain is bigger than the horse's brain. It was very a contrast. But I mean, spectacular. And I will make sure that video gets uploaded, and when it does, I might put an announcement on the, it's gonna be in Brightspace, because I cannot put it on mine, you know what I mean? I can put most stuff on my website, but I can't put like a movie that people buy, because that's infringement of their copyright. But I can put it for you, because you can log in, and it's only for you, and it's educational. It's just, although there's very few animals, but it shows you the appreciation. I mean, look at that trachea, right there. I mean, dissecting all these things out, and then making them embed in plastic. Now, how can you get this exhibit to like Paris? Can you imagine the money it would cost? Because you can't fold this up. This is stuck that way. That animal in person has to be transported that way. I bet you they have some foam that might come from both sides, right? And I bet you they hire their own plane. They probably have their own plane, you know, because can you imagine somebody dropping that? And you're not talking about $100 loss. You're not talking even thousands. You're talking about many thousands. What exhibit? If you ever see it, Body Worlds. I'll maybe try to. Okay, let's do one last thing since we're talking about it, and it is anatomy. Let's do Body Worlds exhibit. Because you know, for all I know, they might have said, "I've had enough." Okay, and they have their own website. Oh, there's something about Houston there. Oh, accept, whatever. You know, I always hit I accept, and I don't even know what I'm accepting because this is not my computer. Anyway, oh, see, here it is. Now this reminds me, they've got the animal display. Okay, about animal inside out. Okay, there's, you know, look at that dissection job though. I mean, holy smokes. If you know anything about dissection, do you know how many hundreds of hours to get that person like that? And then they pose them while they're still flexible, then they embed the plastic. Because once it's hardened, and you'll see the video, once it's hardened, that's it. It's like, I can't change this bottle, can I? I can't. It's that way. Anyway, I forgot, they do. Okay, cities, all cities, Europe. See, Europe, America, and Canada, you need a big population. Here's opens November 4th, okay? Milan, Italy. There's Austria, there's Germany. Closed, permanent, until October 3rd in Germany. I mean, it's very popular the world around. I don't even want to tell you the name of the knockoffs. Because, you know, they knocked it off, but there might be some unethical things going on. Like prisoners before they die, right? So anyway, this guy's a legit. He's, the video, if you listen to him, it's about an hour long. You know, appreciate what he's doing, the work they're doing, but it's still going on. And so since that's the case, then here's the animal. Is it, let's see, okay, that's about, so, you know, and then the other thing is, see, that heart reminds me of something. Then some of the displays are, like this is a sad display, a pregnant woman. And she died while she was pregnant, and they dissected her front part off, but the uterus is open, you see the fetus, the young unborn baby. She donated her body to science. Maybe she knew before, or she was dying of cancer and she was pregnant. And they show you, I mean, look at the anatomy that you can learn. So anyway, so they had body parts too, you know, separate from the whole body. But let's just do the animal thing here. Okay. So they've done a bunch of animals, and you know what I'm going to try to do? I'm going to see if they have a DVD I can buy, and if they do of the animals, I'll put it on Brightspace for us. Katie, remind me about that, okay? Rod, find out a DVD. Because see, when I bought it, I went to the display, and then they had a shop open of DVDs and books and stuff. I'll have to look, but I haven't, it's been a while since I looked at that. Anybody have any questions on that? But it's fascinating. Let's go to our reading, because I want to give you some hints of how to glean, G-L-E-A-N, That means harvest facts from the reading. So you only do the reading once and you never go back to the reading, because you're going to extract statements of fact and you're going to put them on pages that are topped by headlines, one subject like kidneys or nephron or heparin, and then everything you know about heparin is bulleted statements below the term. And that's how you study. And then here's the beautiful thing about that. If you have notes that are in a 3-ring binder and it's got heparin, alphabetize everything. Heparin is before renal. Then if you take another physiology class, depending on your career objectives, then you take that page out that says heparin and take it to your new course. And when you learn new things about heparin, you make more bulleted statements. And you're accumulating everything you know about heparin on one sheet. It's not in those notes from that course. It's not in that book. It's all here, and I can review it in 10 seconds. Everything I've ever had about heparin. Powerful. Because you know how we have notes, and then the notes get in the closet, and whatever you learned about that, it's there, and it's not here. So, now there's all these suggestions. I can't remember. I'll have to find that one video that talks about it. So here's the reading for this week. There's nothing in for the next week, but what I'll probably do is I'll flip them so the newest stuff is always on top, so you don't have to scroll past, you know what I mean? So I'm going to probably put week of 229 up here, and the first week is going to continue down the page, right? It's probably a more logical way to do it. So, if you want to learn this stuff forever, you never rush. And I'm going to purposely model what I would do if these topics are going to be someplace in my future. Because here's one thing I haven't said this semester. Can anybody here tell the future? You can have a good guess, but you know how silly that is to try predict the future. If there's anybody that can, here's what you and I are doing tonight. We're on the red-eye flight to Vegas. And all you have to do is tell me odd, even, black, green, and by the morning rolls around, we're not going to bed at all. We will have so much money that we can rent our own jet to go back home. If you can predict the future. If you can't, you better stay with me and learn, right? Nobody can. You can't predict it. So here it is, topics. Circulatory system, that means blood flowing, but I should maybe say fluid flowing. There's more than blood that flows, but blood is the only fluid that circulates. Starts here, goes here, goes here, goes here. That's circulation. So in one sense, blood is the only thing that circulates in the body. It's not the only fluid. And you might say, blood is the only fluid that goes back to the heart. Nope. There's another fluid that goes back to the heart. Like what? And that's called lymph. All the lymph, L-Y-M-P-H, all the lymph you make goes back to the heart. But it only goes back. It never comes out of the heart. Wow. So these readings are about blood. And then, of course, you're going to learn prefixes and suffixes, and whenever you see this, hemato, that means blood. Poetic, that means producing. So that reading is about producing blood. And then it says, when you click on it, there's going to be 4 topics. Be aware of that. This 4 does not refer to these. So maybe I should show you that. Okay, it says circulatory system. Now, where I tend to have you go is to companies or universities that I know I can trust. Sometimes there's a vet clinic that has some great stuff too. But you got to be careful, because why? The internet is a big library but there's no librarians, right? When I uploaded that, I gotta remember to do this. When I uploaded that video last night, I'm thinking, gosh, I wonder if the censors are gonna screen it and find out it's all about naked bodies. Body worlds, right? Can you see how somebody could take that out of context? And I'm thinking, I wonder if I'm gonna get a call uploading a dirty video into the Purdue system, right? I would understand if they, took something out of context. I mean, I got ground to stand on. I'm teaching this stuff. Oh, that reminds me, I used to know the person that taught in psychology. Isn't there one about sex? Isn't there? Do they still have it or not? It's something about sex. Anyway, I used to know the instructor, and she would go to a video store and but rent porno movies. And they would watch them in class and talk about, sexuality, I guess human sexuality. I always laughed at her because she goes, she was coming over to visit us. She goes, I'm running late. I got to go get a video for tomorrow's class. I'm not like that, but I uploaded the naked bodies. See, that's a psychological slip there, not dirty. Anyway, naked bodies. So let's click on that. I want to make sure you understand that whenever you click on something, don't follow the other clicks that are on that page because you get lost, right? You know how it is. There's a lot of hyperlinks. So here's what you do. You click on this. Let's see where it's at. Merck Vet Manual. Accept, whatever. And then see the then you click on this, right? Remember how that said, so click on hematopoietic system, and that means this. And then there's 4 topics. Let's see. The overview. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So that's maybe not my best example, but the thing is, Merck Manual, pretty good. Everybody's writing this stuff are professionals. Let me do this again and show you. So here's Susan, DVM. She's boarded, Tufts University, and she wrote this thing about blood supply cells with water, and we're going to do this in a little bit. But then what I like about it is, let's go see what Susan does. And you can click on her page here, and if it's too long, oops. So here's the thing. That link doesn't work. When I run into that, I email Merck and tell them. And they've been so responsive. Like sometimes there's an image missing or it doesn't work. I email them and say, hey, this one's not working. Because it's probably a link to someplace else. Notice how it's a link off Merck, it's now to Tufts. So here's the other thing you should know about these links. Sometimes someplace changes the directory and the link doesn't work. But they might not know it unless one of us tell them, okay? So be aware of that. I have no control over their website. I wouldn't call Tufts or email Tufts. I would email Merck so they can fix their website. See that? Because it's someplace there, I'm sure. Anyway, be aware of that logic. And then another thing about my web pages, they change, and if your computer is using cache, then you're in trouble. A lot of computers will store a web page in its memory, and it won't go out to, when you click it again, it won't go out to the real world. It'll just look at your stored one. So if you ever see something, if I said, I put up the reading for 829, and it still looks like this, you do a hard reload. And you can always look that up on Google if you don't know what it is. A hard reload means you force the computer to go out on the internet to find the latest copy. Otherwise, some computers say, I've got a copy of that, I'm going to show it to you. Be aware of that. Okay, so that one's got 4. Circulation. Here's a picture of the heart. If it's and Wikipedia is pretty good. If there are images in Wikipedia, you should know they're all clickable and they enlarge in most cases. So be aware of that. A horse heart of a racehorse, probably in formalin. Obviously, there's a section cut out here. And if that's the thickest wall of the heart, which it's hard to tell the orientation, but there's always one chamber that's thicker than any, and it's the left ventricle. So in your notes, the left ventricle is the thickest walled chamber in the heart. That's a statement of fact. Why is it the thickest? It's the chamber that sends out blood to the body. The one chamber that sends out blood to the body. And by the way, it's carried away from the left ventricle by the aorta, A-O-R-T-A. So the aorta is the largest artery in the horse. And it happens to be under high pressure, and it's full of oxygen. And if you know when tissue is full, a fluid is full of oxygen, that lets you predict the color. The color of arterial blood in the aorta, bright red. Because once oxygen is removed by tissue, blood becomes dark red. Even has a little blue tint to it. So the color of blood changes. So if you've got an injured animal and it looks really bright blood, you've got an artery leaking and you've got less time than if you see dull blood. Because arteries are under high pressure. Veins are under low pressure. They're easier to close off. Arteries are going to pump out blood and you can bleed to death, right? I mean, I hate to use the example. This is a terrible example, but it's current. Unfortunately, all that gunfire at schools, Uvalde, Texas, nobody was in charge. I was telling my last class, whenever I'm someplace, I'm in charge. I'm in charge of all you guys. Do you know that? If I say, we gotta leave, we're all gonna leave. If we're in lab and something goes wrong, maybe somebody's doing something wrong, you leave, right? Or everybody leaves. I'm always in charge because that's what I get paid for, right? Anyway, Uvalde, I bet you some of those kids bled to death over time. And that's what's making the parents so mad. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous anyway. And see, I'm very I'm very risk sensitive, or I'm very aware of risk. And you might say, well, they should have locked all those doors. They should have locked all the doors. There's certain things, the doors weren't locked. Anybody could walk in. What? Because the gunman was outside in the yard shooting at people. What? And he got into the building? That's insane. Don't get me started, but some of those kids bled to death over time, and they could have been saved if they would have been, right? Because if they were losing a lot of blood, the ambulance could do a venipuncture or cannulate them and give them fluid, right? And you know that happened to some of them. There was no saving, right? Anyway, thick chamber, and look at how much I can talk about the heart. And you know, every mammal that we refer to has one heart. There's 4 chambers, but the color of blood changes depending on how much oxygen is there. And here's another thing about the heart. It's always in the thoracic cavity, the chest cavity. Okay, now I still got to, I've got 5 minutes left. I'm going to model something. I'm going to just do it here. Remember, I suggest reading something once. If you know it already, there's no need to write it down. But if it's something new, then you write it down in a bulleted statement in your notebook. And if you have time, you could put a page on the top, say heart. And every time you write something about the heart, put it in a bullet statement on that page only. If it's something about another organ, that's another page. And then you put them alphabetical in a 3-ring binder, and you can do it. Okay, the equine heart. Well, hopefully you know equine means horse. If you don't, you could write it down. Muscular, right? It's the only organ that has cardiac muscle. That's something that you know, I don't know if you know or not. There's 3 types of muscle. I already talked about another one. What was the other type I talked about? Smooth, right? Okay, anyway, so you digest this paragraph by paragraph, and then you never read it again. Okay? Because you're going to write it down. Let's see. Okay, so I'm not going to compare the shape of the heart to the human, whatever, but it consists of 4 chambers. There's 4 chambers in a horse heart, but you gotta be careful, we didn't say equine heart on the top, we said heart. So, we can say there's 4 chambers in a heart. And then they name them. There's a left and right atria, and that's a plural term for atrium, A-T-R-I-U-M. So there's a left atrium and a right atrium, and then there's a left ventricle and a right ventricle. And I already told you the left ventricle is the strongest, thickest walled. The adult horse has an 8-pound heart. Notice how I'm going to do that? I could write that down, 8 pounds. I think I got a heart saved from a horse. I used to go someplace where they butchered horses. It's illegal to have horse meat in your van, but I did, of course, because I was coming back here. Anyway, let's see, heart, okay, where am I at? I'm up here, yeah, okay. Although it can be more than twice the size, so you should know that hearts can vary, but if they get too big, that's bad, usually. You've heard of athletes dying of enlarged hearts, because what happens is the heart muscles get so thick they can't pump enough blood out. They're so powerful, but they don't pump enough blood, right? Because remember, one stroke of the left ventricle sends blood out to the body, the aorta, and that's a lot of resistance. Okay, let's see, the heart grows until the horse is 4 years old. That's kind of neat, so a 2-year-old horse doesn't have the mature heart. But remember, you're going to write this down, but never go back to it. Never going to read this again. That's wasting time. You're going to read those little statements. Yeah. So it depends on the conditioning. A racehorse is going to have a more stronger horse than a horse that's at the carnival giving little kids a ride, right? Or a therapy horse. Heart size does not necessarily correlate to the size of the horse. Okay, so no. Some organs, you can't say a bigger heart in a bigger horse, right? There's some variation. Here we go, capacity determined by the mass of the heart and spleen. Now here's a new concept. The spleen, okay, well you should know, remember physiology is function. The function of the spleen is to filter blood. Maybe some of you know somebody that's had a ruptured spleen. Take it out. It's hard to do surgery on something that full of blood vessels. You usually take it out. A car accident victim, blunt force trauma of the spleen, gone. In a dog, tumor of the spleen, gone. You don't mess with it. Okay, here we go. Yes. And once the oxygen has entered the bloodstream, it must be transported to working muscles. So, basically it's red blood cells, right, that take oxygen away. We haven't talked about pulmonary system yet. But of course, every tissue needs oxygen. You got to write that. Every tissue needs oxygen. If it doesn't, it dies. That's necrosis. So every tissue needs oxygen. Okay, then equine cardiovascular system is hugely compliant with the heart rate. Okay, so look at 20 to 240 beats per minute. That's almost too much of a range. But in general, the bigger the horse, the lower the heart rate. And that also goes for animals. The bigger the animal, the slower beats per minute than a small animal. Okay? In general. Remember, I'm doing general things. I'm not going to get buried into, I'm not going to have you know exactly what the horse beats. You can always look that up, if it's in your professional. Okay, splenic means spleen, red cell reserve. So what you should know is the spleen not only filters blood, but it stores blood. And this is one of those compensations. If a dog is in an accident and it loses blood, the spleen contracts and puts some blood out into the system.